All right, one final world, and that is the surface. Same ratings as always. I actually was going to give the atmosphere a lower rating, but I'm going to give it 5 stars because it's recognizable as Breath of the Wild Hyrule, but at the same time, there were a lot of areas I was like, whoa, this is different. But like, not so much that you're like, did they just totally retcon the surface? Obviously, the caves and many different things. It just felt a little bit more alive. And I know it's not completely rebuilt like we would have liked. It did feel more alive, and I actually spent most of my time on the surface, which is funny because the sky is what's advertised and the depths is what's the most creepy. And then gameplay wise, I actually also give it a 5. I mean, it definitely had more side quests. Still not amazingly memorable side quests for me personally, but still a lot to do. Lots of NPCs that... The one thing that bothers me is that they don't remember Link, a lot of them. That did bother me a lot. I was like, but I played it. They should know who I am. Some do. But I won't drone on actually too much about that. I give both 5. I'm surprised considering that should be the most boring area because it's the most recognizable, but that's where I'm at. All right, what about you, Draken?
I actually agree with you with a 5 and a 5. On atmosphere, like you said, it's nice to revisit the old areas that you knew from the past game. It's like I was a little apprehensive about reusing the map when the game was first announced. I was hoping that we would get a new world, new setting to explore. And I was cautious about all of that, and I wasn't sure if I'd like it to explore it all over again. But then again, after playing it, the time skip really does work wonders for the whole experience. Just going around and seeing how Hyrule evolved after the credits rolled in the past game. That's something that was a bit missing in Breath of the Wild, just seeing the context of what happens after you beat Calamity Ganon. And one thing that was really sad was that I really liked that little pocket of baobabs and water beneath Wasteland Tower, and that's all dead now. There is a cherry blossom there, but everything else is dead because of climate change. That was sad. But yeah, the atmosphere, I loved the surface. That was the best part. I'd say that maybe there was a smidge too many caves. It could really use a little less in terms of caves because it was getting a little bit repetitive towards the end. But then again, you don't exactly need to go for the bubble frog paraglider Colton's fabric. You don't need to. But I did. Well, it was fine. And for gameplay 5 as well, because like you said, there is a lot to do on the surface and a lot of things going on, and exploring all the areas and just going to see, oh, how Great Plateau changed, or what happened with Satori Mountain or whatever. It was really fun, re-exploring it all over again. And I'm also sad that NPCs didn't recognize Link because I definitely recognized them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was worried that maybe it's because of me, because I played it on a new console, on a new Switch, so my old save file wasn't there. Not that it exists on the older Switch anyway, it's long gone because of how many playthroughs I did. But yeah, it was unfortunate.
Yeah. At least we did get the transfer of the horses, though. Well, that's one thing we got.
Yeah, that was such a nice surprise.
I was so happy because the giant horse from Gerudo Desert ended up being needed for a side quest. I was like, great, I don't have to go find it. Let me just go to the nearby stable. I already got it. That giant horse. But, all right. Next, we will have Gaming Reinvented, your rating of the surface.
I'd say I agree with being a 5 for both the atmosphere and content. I will say that it probably improved a lot of what Breath of the Wild kind of messed up on as far as content goes. Because in that game, there's a lot of times you come across enemy camp, it'd be the same 3 enemies over and over again, or you'd find the same few treasures or same few items, etc. Whereas in this game, the variety just feels so much higher. So when you go to a far distant corner of the world, there's actually something to do this time around. Lorulian Village has a purpose. Stuff like Rock Forest has a purpose. Stuff like Gerudo Town and Rito Village and all that stuff, they've got unique enemies you don't see anywhere else. You've got unique bosses, you've got unique places. The side quests with stables more interesting. And I feel like, I'm not sure what it is to say that's negative about it. I guess the only issue might be that it might be a bit overwhelming or a bit too densely packed. I mean, there's definitely 10 times more enemies in this game than there were Breath of the Wild. So it can be a bit hard to go in without being ambushed by something.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
All right. And Daniel.
Yeah, I mean, I also pretty much agree with everything. I find the gameplay loop even more engrossing here than in Breath of the Wild, which, again, I love Breath of the Wild, so it's not a dish on that game. I just think they built off it really nicely, where, like you said, there's lots of enemy camps, but I find that every enemy is worth going after and picking up their drops this time. There was very little cause to have a 900 bokoblin horns in my inventory in Breath of the Wild, but they essentially took everything that was either maybe half developed or just maybe needed a little bit of improvement, and they found a way to make all of those elements more useful in this game, I thought. And yeah, I mean, just content-wise, I loved exploring caves. I really felt motivated to explore this version of Hyrule, even though it's one I'm very intimately familiar with from the last game. I think my total playtime on Breath of the Wild was well over 1,500 hours, and so that was a point I was a little concerned about. How is that going to be? Re-exploring the same Hyrule. I didn't want to be a doubter, because I know the Zelda team knows how to deliver, but at the same time I was well, we'll see how that turns out. And I felt that actually worked really well to the game's benefit as a direct sequel, because I had this driving curiosity to see what's new and what's different, and you can really feel that passage of time between the games, whereas pretty much any other Zelda game, when you have a new map, it's this isolated moment in Hyrule's history that if you'll never see what 10 years after Twilight Princess is going to be like. We'll never see that. We just have this snapshot of what Hyrule was like in that moment, or two moments in Ocarina of Time's cases. So just feeling that passage of time and how society has changed, or what new trends are in, or what what new things are being built, or that was really cool. I thought that was really awesome. I wasn't as bothered by the NPC thing as a lot of people, but I felt that there was three categories where they don't recognize you, there's ambiguity, or they absolutely do recognize you. And I actually have a video I was going to work on that was categorizing every NPC into one of those three, but it's going to take me a really long time because there's so many NPCs to talk to. But I don't know. I felt the gameplay loop very, very engrossing. So yeah, just 5 stars all around. I won't drone on any farther, but.
Well, I think what's funny about all of us giving 5 stars so far is I was most worried about the surface gameplay more than anything, because I was well, the sky is new, and then figuring out the depths were way bigger than I thought they were going to be is all new. And yet, so far, everyone seems to be really favoring the surface. Well, I mean, I feel like Daniel and I are probably a little more, and Josh a little more even keel on all of them, but still, you would think the surface would have been the most boring part. But it's that just shows Nintendo, they made sure this is going to be different and this is going to be enjoyable, but it's recognizable. So anyway, moving on. Adam.
I'm very glad you picked me there, because what you just said was exactly where I was going to go with saying it's a 5 out of 5 for me on both areas. A lot of that is to do with the fact that going into the game, I genuinely thought Hyrule would be the weakest point of everything new. I thought it would very quickly feel repetitive. I felt like I wouldn't be motivated to re-explore it, but I was very, very wrong. In every way, I really enjoyed re-exploring the kingdom. I loved seeing what's changed. What I even enjoyed seeing what stayed the same. Because even things that remain the same have very minor details, which are a nice touch. Yeah, atmosphere, I loved it. I love everything that's going on with the upheaval. I love how people react to the upheaval. Gameplay, that's probably where I was more worried, but I was very happy with how much there was to see and do, and I don't think I'll ever see a cooler shot than just standing there and being able to see a chunk of an island fall down. That is one of my favorite things to see. And then it grabs your attention. You go look at it, and then you might see another one fall. You might see something else. And yeah, it's just so exciting to explore. And my favorite part of it is the caves. I'm a very, very, very big cave fan. I can't get enough of them. I've not even explored all of them yet. Yeah, I love exploring the caves. It's like a mini adventure in a way, and some of them are the same, but there are some that go quite deep. And I love the fact that you can go into a cave, exit the other side, and realize you've not seen it all, and then you need to go back in and find what you've missed. Yeah, I'd give them both a solid 5 out of 5.
If I could just throw in a point too, if we didn't have Ascend, I feel like caves would suck.
Yes.
I feel like
Yeah,
it would be so
very
boring.
true.
And, like,
Agreed.
yeah, and the fact that they gave us just a quick way out. That was
It would be tedious without Ascend.
It would
Especially
be,
with the
yeah.
shrines
Yes.
being in there
Yeah.
as warp points. You never know if you're warping into the surface or into a cave.
Yeah.
right.
So
And I've
if
done
you
that
warp
plenty of
into a
times. I'm like,
cave-
dang it. Oh, wait, I'll just go up.
Yeah.
I'm all
Yeah,
good.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Oh, I love that ability.
Most most locations of shrines have been annoying without Ascend.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that was I think someone said that was like a debug feature that they used like during playtesting, and then they realized like, you know what, without this, like this really, we should just leave this in and make it a core part of the game, and that was like totally the right call.
Best decision ever.
Yeah,
Very
yeah,
good decision.
Totally the right call.
It's probably my favorite ability. All right, Nehru.
Adam, I know you said that you like caves. Would you say that you are a cave boy?
Yeah, one could say that. One could say that. There's rumors.
The rumors, yeah. I'm an extremely critical person, so it should come no surprise that I'm going to be the complete outlier here and say that I was actually kind of disappointed by the surface in Hyrule. In some ways, I was disappointed, and then other ways it's met and even exceeded my expectations. For example, one way in which it exceeded my expectations is what Captain said, in regards that a lot of stuff that was just, vendor trash for me in the first game now has practical use. And it made it so I went out of my way to collect things, whereas I probably would have just left them be in the first game. Like honestly, if I shot a bomb arrow into a pile of bokoblins and watched their body pieces go flying, in Breath of the Wild I probably wouldn't collect them. I'd just leave them be. But in this game, I'm like, well, I might need that to fuse into something later down the road. So I definitely appreciated that. And then there were some new features in the surface that are new that I liked, like the building, holding up the signs. That was a lot of fun. Always figuring out how to do that. But I was honestly, one of my big concerns leading up to it was whether the surface was going to be changed enough to justify being a sequel. And in my opinion, it was not changed enough. There were certainly parts, like I thought that the Gerudo town and the desert in general were extremely different for some fairly obvious reasons. And that was my first one I did, and I was kind of hoping that everywhere was going to have changes that extreme, which was just not the case at all. So when I did that one first, and then I went to do the Goron quest, where the big change was just that Yunobo's kind of being a bit of a weirdo now, and a whole bunch of the Gorons are addicted to drugs. Like, that's interesting, but it's not really, it's not a fundamental change. Like, the way you explore the town or the area is not really different. And then, the Rito is kind of an in-between point where things are a little bit different, but also not that big of a deal. So I would have liked to see a lot more changes in similar to how Gerudo Town was changed, because for the most part I just found it pretty underwhelming. Like, running to Kakariko Village was pretty cool because of all the rings that had fallen down, and then you can't interact with them really outside of one quest. And then 99% of the overworld was just the exact same as before. So like I had very little I don't really like maybe that's part of the problem, is I'm not a big guy for exploring just for the sake of exploring. So re-exploring areas that I already know what look like didn't really have a tremendous amount of interest to me. So when an area wasn't thoroughly changed, I just had very little interest in exploring it. The caves were good. They definitely brought a lot of much needed variety to places when I was exploring. And I actually found that the cave rewards tended to be pretty good, which I was not expecting going in. But overall, I definitely left the game feeling like I don't think that the overworld was as changed as it should have been for a sequel. Thankfully, the depths in the sky brought enough change that overall I think the game does have enough new, but I do wish that the surface would have been just a little bit more variety and a little bit more change.
All right, fair enough. Which, by the way, my husband just got home, so there might be times where my mic's unmuted and he's doing things, just FYI. All right, Josh.
So I'm gonna go ahead and agree with everybody so far. I give it a solid 5 out of 5, but my reason might be a bit different. I grew very attached to Breath of the Wild's world. I really enjoyed exploring that world for the first time, and when I heard they were going to reuse the same map again, I was like, oh wow, that's really cool. I wonder how much is going to change. And that's why whenever my first feeling when I got off the Great Sky Island and went back into Hyrule's world for the first time, I was like, the first thought that came to my mind was, wow, it's good to be back. This is really cool that we're back in this world, and it has all changed. And that's like kind of what I was saying earlier. My first thought was, I want to go to the Great Plateau, see what's changed there. I want to go all over here. My mind was immediately jumping to all these different places that I was like, I wonder how that's changed. Like, just the curiosity of how all these places in Breath of the Wild's world that we've explored for years, how has all this changed? And I really just enjoyed that. And the surface complements the sky and depths very well, because you're exploring, the base world of Hyrule, and you come across a chasm and that leads down into the depths, or you start on the surface in like the dungeon quest to get to the water temple or get to the wind temple. It starts on the surface and it slowly builds up into the sky. So I think, the surface complements both the sky and the depths really well. And I really, you really can't have those two without, changing the surface of Hyrule. So that's why I give it a 5 out of 5.